As a professor of education and educational psychology and the mother of 2 multiracial children, I wanted to film this documentary to bring awareness to the growing number of multiracial people in our society and to compel educators and the community at large to ponder the meaning of race. Census 2010 denotes the first extensive recording of the explosive rise in the multiracial population. That has changed over 10 years since data was first collected in 2000. Overwhelmingly, the statistics show that the multiracial population is mostly young. 9 million people chose more than one race on the 2010 census, while 7 million people identified themselves as being white and some other race in 2000. A significant change from the 2000 census shows the most common racial population is black and white. There are 57 racial combinations on the census. Most people chose one of the 4 typical pairings. 20.4% identified themselves as black and white. 19.3% selected white and some other race. Asian and white was the 3rd highest combination, and American Indian and white was the 4th. I interviewed approximately 200 multiracial people, most of them children, about how they feel about being multiracial. We discussed their self-identity, social relationships, discrimination, and family traditions. What I learned from doing this project is that being mixed race used to be marginalized, but according to the current census and the children in this film, it is now celebrated.
Filipino,
German, Scottish, and English.
Native American.
A little Irish.
Portuguese, African American, Indian, and Scottish.
Black and white.
Italian.
Half Puerto Rican.
My father's African American and my mother is mostly Italian.
Half white and half black.
Italian.
I'm a little bit Irish.
I am a Chinese, Afro-Cuban, Russian, Jewish girl.
African American.
Half Chinese.
African American.
African American.
Question mark. I was raised by African American parents.
Well, my mom's side is from Italy and my dad's side is from Costa Rica.
Irish.
I'm black and white.
I'm adopted, and the latest information that I'm African American and Italian or Jewish.
I might be part Indian, I'm not sure.
Irish,
Puerto Rican.
Italian.
Native American, African American, and also German.
My mom is Russian Jewish, and my father was a Cuban man with African and Chinese and a whole bunch of other stuff thrown in there. And when I was a young child, I identified more because I was raised by my mom with the Russian Jewish aspect of things. And I would say probably in my 20s, I started to really look into more of, the totality of who I was. And so really started embracing the Cuban side, the Hispanic heritage. And so, it's interesting. I'm all of it now. I think if you asked me when I was younger, I might have said Jewish or Hispanic. And now I say all of it.
Well, yeah, I was raised African American by dark-skinned African Americans. I was raised inner city in South Jamaica, Queens. I'm much older than maybe what you think I am. I was raised in the 60s. So I was raised during a lot of the civil rights periods, Martin Luther King periods, a lot of the uprising. I was raised by a father who was in, I'm really dating myself, who was in a segregated baseball league. He played in the minority, in an all-black baseball league because there was nothing available for baseball players, African-American men at that time.
I would show up at events and I didn't look like everyone else. And, it's interesting because there would be, I don't want to call it racism because people meant well, but they would always say, oh, you don't look like a Jewish girl, like it was a compliment. Or you're too pretty to be Jewish. I'm like, you think that's a compliment, really? And so it was interesting because I knew I didn't look like everybody else. I knew my background wasn't quite the same, but yet I knew how I was raised.
I was raised black, but I don't look black. So whenever I came home, my parents, I would say, Mom, they're talking to me in Spanish. And I'm like, and they said, tell them you're black, tell them you're black. So I had a big identity crisis. I had a mom that looked like you, and a dad looked like any other African American guy. I was a big 6'2" football playing guy. And so I was a little bit in a quandary. So I strongly, like a lot of what we call light-skinned black men, strongly identified with the black culture and did everything black and really isolated myself from anything else socially. And something I regretted doing. But
people now are a lot more open to different ethnicities and people with interesting backgrounds like ours than they were when both of us were growing up as kids.
A little bit. My father was very angry of all the racism that he's been through in the 40s and all the subjective. So I inherited much of that and had to understand where that's from and understand that I can't hate myself because I'm white also. So I had to integrate a lot of those issues, and as a result, I've learned to accept the black in me, the white in me. I'm also a physician. I'm also an attorney. I'm also from the inner city. I'm also from the country. So I've learned to be, instead of...
You incorporate all of it.
You incorporate all. Joanne has done the same, but I just learned to I can't be inclusive in terms of one group. I'm not really accepted by any group. I'm not really accepted by the black groups or the Spanish group. But what's wonderful is I'm accepted by all. I can flow through any group, and I use that. I accept that now as an asset instead of a liability.
The interesting thing is that people will often feel comfortable to say things around me that they wouldn't say to a Jewish person to their face. So I have heard all sorts of Jewish slurs and black slurs and Hispanic slurs and all sorts of things hurled around me because people feel comfortable, not recognizing that my grandma was black, my great-grandfather was Asian, my mama is Jewish, my daddy's Cuban, not realizing that I've got that kind of a background. And, sometimes I'd call people out on it if I was close enough with them, and other times I would just keep my mouth shut. But, it's amazing to me how people will talk around you when they don't know what you are.
Being an emergency room doctor, I don't get the racism that a lot of people, there's a comfort level with me because people don't know what I am. Indian think I'm Indian, black, they don't know until I talk. So they realize, oh, you're a brother, you're fine, and I'm not gonna mess with you. And so it's really helped my skill sets. But in terms of racism, just even as in high school, not so much. I was in a very racially divided high school in the 70s. John Adams, next to the Aqueduct in New York City, was one of the most tense because we were bused. We were in the busing period. So we were bused into an all-Italian Queen Ozone Park, and that's one of those areas where it was a death. There's been a lot of killings, racially motivated killings in that area that's been high profile. And I was, part of that tension. And one time I was just with a group of black kids, and suddenly we were attacked by the neighborhoods with chains and so forth, and had to, literally run for our lives because they had weapons. So that was a group kind of thing. Other things is sad is that this isn't so much to do with white, but I wanted to see a Spanish girl. I think she was Puerto Rican, and her parents said, no, you're forbidden to see him because you're black. We want a white Latino to her to date. And she did, actually, years later, found she did date a white Latino minister or something because they wanted to better prove her chances. Never gave me an opportunity. Those are, biases that really hurt you. And on top of the fact of, I think whenever I've been called the N-word, I don't get offended. I say, thank you, finally you know.
As soon as I meet somebody for the first time, they get this little look on their face. And they've got this look on their face like, what are you? And so I'll just break the ice because, it's like you can see they're painting. You can see the wheels are going on in their head. Like, okay, I'm trying to categorize this person. What is she? Is she Hawaiian? Is she Native Indian? Is she, Hispanic? But she didn't really look Hispanic. I see it going. So I'll usually break the ice and just start talking about ethnicity and kind of go from there. That's been my interaction socially. I don't mind telling people who I am. I've got nothing to hide. I'm me. I'm very proud.
I've got nothing to prove. You know, I know who I am. I'm settled on that. I understand the history, but I understand there's so much more. There's so much more to learn, and networking is important. Relationships are important, and it's not so much about the color of the skin. It's about the people.
The children I spoke to were very much aware of their racial identity and are proud of who they are. Many of them indicated they are often identified incorrectly and that they prefer to be asked what they are rather than to be assumed. Being multiracial isn't hard because they are confused about their racial identity. It's hard because others are.
I prefer them to ask me because, I don't know, it's nice to let them know who I am without them just assuming.
Well, when people ask me who I am, like what nationalities I am, I tell them everyone.
But sometimes children don't want everybody to know what they are just because they might not be proud of it. So this is like a 50-50 thing, but if the teacher knew that the students are comfortable with themselves, then maybe you could go around, like on the first day of school, you could say your name and your cultural background and what you like to do. But that all depends because I have a lot of friends that aren't very comfortable with who they are.
I like when people ask me because then they don't just label me as Asian.
Okay.
I don't know why, but that just bothers me a little bit.
Self-identity is a term used to describe a person's conception and expression of his or her individuality. Contemporary thinking of racial identity development stems from a combination of psychology and the racial pride movements of the 1960s and 70s. Most racial identity theories are really single racial identity theories that fit nicely under one of the main categories of Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. But when one is mixed race, there is no explanation for how people come to identify with more than one race.
The research shows that most multiracial children have really positive and strong racial identities.
I'm pretty confident in myself. I think I really like everything about myself because I made myself who I am, so I should like it.
I feel good about it because I love my parents for making me, so it's really good being mixed because people treat me like I'm really important.
I don't know, I just like myself.
Is there anything you don't like about yourself?
Well, when I was younger, I didn't really I don't know why, but I just didn't like myself. But now I really don't care what people think, and I just live my life to the fullest.
I don't really think there's anything that I would change. I like everything that I have about me. The thing I like the most about me is my hair.
Your hair? Tell me about your hair.
I think it's really unique because my hair, it's like light brown, but I also have blonde in it, and it's naturally like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like really curly, and I like that.
I don't really dislike anything. It just makes me happy that I'm different.
Multiracial kids have in their own experiences a whole host of assets, a whole host of work that they've done, a whole set of connections that they've had to make for themselves that either sit completely outside of their experiences as students or find ways to be woven into their thinking of them moving from their out-of-school identity to their school identity.
Peer interactions are critical avenues through which children continue to shape their ethnic and racial identities. Children's conceptions of friendship develop from participating in activities to finding common interests. Peer groups are important because they foster the ability to communicate, develop social skills, and allow for a point of view. These children see being multiracial as an advantage because they are able to relate and fit into a variety of racial worlds.
I don't really look at the race of my friends. I think it's just the personality that matters because when it comes down to it, it's just things that we like to do and have fun. So everyone's a different race, and it's okay.
I tend to hang out with more Caucasian people, and I just feel more comfortable around them because I'm a cheerleader, and I feel like I'm judged more around African Americans because I am such a happy person, and they're just like, you're not African American, I swear you're the whitest person I know. I'm like, oh, all right. So I just kind of got sick of being judged, and so I went where I wasn't judged so much.
Mostly Italians. I have some African Americans and not many biracial friends.
They're from like all around. Like when I come home with one of them, my sisters always tell me you never have like a friend that's actually from America. They're all from like over the place.
I have different friends that from different cultures, like my friend EJ, who's Filipino, my friend Ryan, who's a part Italian, and my friend Justin, who is Portuguese.
Like I have friends that are like probably the whitest kid in the school. Then I have friends that are the blackest kid in the school. Like my friends are completely, like I have a wide range of friends, like, and that really really doesn't bother me. Like I'm fine with that, they're fine with that.
I have like a lot of friends that are like different nationalities, some that are like the same as me. And I like to like make friends that like aren't like the same, that aren't always the same thing as me, because it's fun to learn about other people's nationalities too.
As far as nationality, I don't judge. So I guess if the person has a nice attitude and they're doing something productive with their life, then I guess we can talk.
My best friend, she's Puerto Rican, and then my other group of friends that are really close, it's made up of a whole bunch of races. One of my friends is also half black, half white, and then another friend is Hispanic, and then I have my white friends, and it's just, I don't identify with one group. I just float around to all different types.
Discrimination, prejudice, and exclusion can trigger painful emotions in life. But what I have learned from the children involved in this project is that most multiracial people have found a racial identity they are comfortable with. For some of them, this important work started very early in life, with the realization that they were different in the eyes of other people. A few of the children talked about being singled out specifically because of the way they look. They spoke about how just by being who they are was sometimes wrong to others.
I don't think I've ever been discriminated against, but my mom, there's like a bunch of different variation of skin colors in the Philippines, and my mom has really light skin color for a Filipino, and her friends are always like, oh, bring your daughter to the Philippines, she could be an actress, she's so light-skinned.
People be like picking on white people, and like it makes me feel upset because I'm half white and I'm mixed and stuff, so it's kind of making me upset.
I've heard like comments that will not look like me, but comments about like, oh, this person is black, so you can't hang out with them, or this person is Italian, so you can't hang out with them or something like that.
But I remember when I was in 3rd grade, we were learning about Martin Luther King and like the slaves and all that. And my teacher, she pointed out like all the African American children in the school, in the class, and she said that we wouldn't be here.
Well, I've had people say that I was Dominican or think I was. I had one Spanish teacher who judged me unfairly because she thought I was Dominican and I already spoke Spanish. And then when she found out I wasn't, she felt bad and upped my grade a lot.
Yeah, I have definitely been discriminated against. I remember when I was in elementary school, my next door neighbor, we were all playing outside and he wanted me to play a game with him and I didn't want to, and he said that if I didn't, he was gonna make fun of the color of my skin. And you know that at the time I didn't really understand like why he would say that to me, but then my father explained to me why. And now I think about it, and you know, that thinking about it now, it hurts. And I know now that when I was treated different, I definitely think that, you know, because I'm black, maybe that's why people treated me so different.
Some people that pick on white people is black, and then black people pick on black people. I just don't get that.
Sometimes when I go into like upper class stores, everybody just seems to look at me like I'm strange, even though I have money. It's just funny because everybody like stereotypes African Americans as like bad people and stuff like that, and then like everybody just has their own opinions, and it's pretty funny. It's stupid.
A lot of people will talk about a different race in a negative way, and it's rude to like hear them say that, because they don't really know anything about that race because it's not theirs and they haven't really been exposed to it as much. Like, for example, a lot of white people, I guess, would say that they don't like all like Dominicans or like Spanish people like walking around like talking a different language, but I don't think that's an issue at all because that's just who they are.
Some people like in my elementary or like even 8th graders that I find when I'm walking home, they say like they call me Asian. They say, "Hey, look, it's an Asian." Or and when I was in elementary school, like I would want to play with some people, but they would say no because you don't look like me. It's just like that sometimes.
I was about 8 and I was in summer camp when another camper had told me I was adopted because my mother was white and I wasn't. And I think that's when it really hit home for me that people didn't see things the same way I did, and I obviously was different.
Well, I think I think all human beings, feel comfortable and at ease when they're with people who are like themselves. And I do think that, so in that way, I think that probably children who grow up in communities that are mixed racially or more diverse, have a sense of other people being like them in that community. And I also think that, regrettably, we do have racism in this culture, and I think that kids experience it and are perhaps more likely to experience it when they're feeling alone and feeling that they're the only people who are multiracial in a particularly white community, whether the racism is intended or not, or whether it's subtle and covert. As my sister-in-law always says, a very cute little biracial black-white 10-year-old boy is one thing, but as he becomes a teenager, he becomes a black male, and that's a different experience.
Food is important to family. It serves as a link between culture and tradition. The areas from which our ancestors originated from often influences our food choices.
A family dinner, we have a big feast, and all our family comes down and visit. And for birthdays, we have ziti and we have cake.
We eat lots of Italian foods and lots of chicken. And occasionally we have like rice and beans, but it's just like, it all depends on what my mother feels like cooking.
I like the Chinese part because I have a Chinese grandmother that makes food, and she makes good food.
Since I'm Italian, I get to eat pasta and pizza and Italian foods.
Meals are very interesting here because one night of the week we'll have Asian stir fry, another night of the week we'll have matzo ball soup, and then another night we'll have lechon or Cuban pork and tostones, and it gets interesting.
And I just want my ribs and my collard greens.
We pretty much eat Italian and Spanish food every single day.
When I'm with my dad, we might go to our aunt's house and eat spaghetti. Mom makes a lot of chicken.
We have, I guess people say soul food, we have that, but it's nothing extreme. We do have the soul food, yeah.
Usually we go to my grandmother's house on my mother's side first because they have dinner earlier, and we'll have like lasagna and spaghetti and bread and butter and salad. And then we go to my father's side after, and we have like fried chicken and macaroni and cheese and collard greens and all of those typical African American Southern foods.
So what's your favorite?
I like the collard greens and macaroni and cheese. Don't tell my grandmother.
Interracial families often have unique experiences as a result of having to deal with the reactions of people from different races. For multiracial people, it especially provides images and messages about who they are. Many interracial parents insist that multiracial children are proud of their collective heritage of both parents. These parents are often inspired to take action to demonstrate the beauty within all races. The extended family's reactions to the marriage and multiracial offspring may impact the child's mixed-race identity. Their view about interracial marriage is often the obstacle for multiracial couples to overcome. However, many families adapt over time and learn to accept interracial relationships and their children.
I think it's really important when children come from families that are able to talk about race and talk about what race means in this culture, in this society, and to help the children understand and practice ways to deal with some of the situations that they might encounter being multiracial. I think it's also very important that the children have experiences with communities of all the races, you know, all the factions of the family or parts of the family that are their heritage. In other words, you know, you want them to feel comfortable in black worlds, white worlds, Latino worlds, whatever their situation is. And that only happens when they are actually living and understanding how cultures and how races differ in terms of expectations and rules, etc. And maybe for me most important is that the children are really valued and cherished by members of all races.
I actually have a story about that because my mother, her mom was biracial, and her family had to actually move because it was in the 40s or the 50s, so they had to move all the way up here just because it wasn't accepted, like where they were living. And yeah, my great-grandmother actually had to lie and say that she was raped because of that. Like it was frowned upon, like throughout the whole community. So they had to move all the way up to Connecticut.
I have been with my mom's side of the family, but my grandfather, he wasn't too happy about my mother, you know, marrying a black man, and so she kind of disconnected herself for a while and then, you know, reconnected. And my grandfather, you know, he has grandkids and, you know, he has to love them and he loves us very much. So not that he deals with it, but he accepts the fact now that we're multiracial, but I still feel disconnected because I know I'm different and I know that my mom's side of the family probably doesn't, you know, they're not around African American people all the time. So that's why I know I'm different, because I know I like different things than them. I like different food, different music, so I know.
Family diversity mirrors student diversity. Teachers have to be prepared to work with a range of children from diverse backgrounds. It is especially important that teachers be sensitive to and understand the changing nature of the ethnic and racial makeup of their students. The lines between racial groups are becoming blurred. Many teachers find race an uncomfortable topic and consider themselves colorblind. Consequently, conversations about race in schools are often absent from the classroom. Teachers' support of any individual differences starts with their own understanding and comfort level with variety. A positive attitude toward multiracial children and their families must exist in the entire school. Training, staff attitudes, resources, textbooks, assignments, and communication should reflect the richness of these diverse students.
One of my colleagues has a great mantra that she always comes back with our new teachers. What do your students need from you? And that isn't just an academic question. That's also a question about what do they need in terms of their own development as young scholars? And how does that literature on adolescent development give us insights into that? Because so often when teachers think about growth, they think about what content does a person need. But once you begin to think developmentally, you ask a slightly different question. What experiences does a young person need to have in order to develop an identity? And it may be that they need more responsibility for their own academic work, or they may need experiences in literature that mirrors some of the struggles that they may be having, or it could mean any number of different things, but it's not just content. It's how that content may map experientially in some young person's life. It's a form of alertness, awareness on the part of a teacher of what is available to be called to the work of scholarliness, and how to help that student themselves see things outside of school as a foundation for schoolwork. I think too much of, especially in urban education, there's this sense of what you have outside of school has no value. And sometimes when we make really relevant activities and kids have a lot of fun, they'll say right back to you, well, that's not real schoolwork today, was it? Because it seems too relevant. It's really using the authority of the teacher to give validity to that work as being real intellectual work. And what's been really interesting over the last few years is how the literature has changed. You know, Erickson's model was one in which there was this sense that during adolescence, a single coherent identity needed to emerge. And that made sense given the narrow sort of framing of adolescent development that was taking place at the time, one that really didn't take into account racial development, gender development, ethnic development. And so new academic literature has really talked about how what's critical is the emergence of sort of a central coherent manager of a teenager's multiple identities. And I think, you know, that literature is important on a host of different ways. For a teacher candidate to have an awareness of that means that they're already framing their students as having multiple identities. That, you know, they know that that girls develop differently than boys, that young African Americans develop differently than ethnic whites, that they have sort of different challenges along those different identities. And some aspects of that identity may overlap, affirm, or conflict the academic identity that is so central for teachers. So that kind of central awareness, I think, has helped teachers see that if you're trying to develop an academic identity, that you're not trying to push out or have the child adopt that whole identity. Rather, a comfort with moving from an identity that might be necessary for them in one context to their school identity that is centrally important in another context. When I walk into Hill House High School, which is an all African American school, 100% African American, what hits me in the face is adolescence. Adolescence, the basic human process we all go through. Yes, their race is important. Yes, their race is a part of that. But I also think sometimes multiculturalism makes it seem as if there aren't some common, important aspects of work. We either seem to be overly erasing kids' humanness by making them into an other, or ignoring it. And I think neither of those are particularly useful approaches. And maybe we have to go through the seesaw to get into some more nuanced time. Sometimes it has nothing to do with it. You just need to work.
Racial mixture has a deep, rich, and complex history in the United States as well as throughout the world. For some multiracial people, developing a positive identity may be more challenging than for others. The combination of personal feelings about their racial differences, the way they socialize within their family, and the attitudes and pressures they experience when they begin to function in society play a heavy part in the way multiracial people see themselves. However, people of mixed racial heritage have unique advantages. Many of them have an enhanced sense of self and identity, a greater intergroup tolerance, and an appreciation of minority cultural groups.
I feel like multiracial children have an advantage because we're not set in one race, you know, we can branch off and we can associate with people easier just because that's part of our background, you know, we know how it feels to not be the same, like one race, you know. Like I said before, I can go to any table and I feel like it's an advantage because it allows me to communicate with others that, like if I was only one race, I probably wouldn't be able to talk to.
I would say that being multiracial is kind of like, it's like if you're black, I feel the same as you. If you're white, I feel the same exact as you because I'm black and white.
I like that I get to experience different cultures and that I know I'm special because a lot of people and a lot of my friends are just one race and I'm different because I'm more than one race.
I love both sides of my family and I'm really proud of being multiracial because I guess how do I say it? It's really, people, I guess, really like multiracial couple because I see it all the time. You know, people are telling me, oh, you're so pretty, you're multiracial. And they say the color of my skin and stuff because of, I don't know how to explain it. I think it's just, it used to be looked down upon, but now people, you know, are proud of it because, you know, we're a melting pot and people are actually coming together. And so I'm never ashamed of that.
Multiracial people are a population that is rapidly growing. Many of them don't want a colorblind society. They just want to be acknowledged. How well they form positive social relationships and a cohesive identity within a society that favors racial purity is largely dependent upon family and community support, which enables them to reflect and take pride in their heritages. Therefore, it is important for educators and those in the greater community to support and respect them.
Just don't assume things. Don't assume we're one way or the other. Get to know us first.
We are all different. But if we had to make a similarity, I guess we don't like being called by one, being titled one thing. We like to be titled what we are.
We're just like everyone else. We're only just more than one race.
We're all different, but even though we look like something else that we might not be, but we could.
Try to be a lot more open and give it a shot because, like I said, everybody can bring something different to the table and they can teach you something that you might not know. And also it just helps make you a better person by dealing with everybody else. You really learn how to relate to people and how to deal with certain types of people.
It's not okay to be judgmental, it's not okay to be stereotypical, and it's not okay to discriminate.
Just because we're mixed doesn't mean that we're not the same thing as you guys. You gotta treat us the same way that you will be treated.